Hi everybody, this is Victoria and welcome back to another new episode of Art Tutorials. Today we are going to learn how to paint hyper-realistic eyes. So I have a painting that I'm currently working on, and I found that since I'm working on the eyes anyways, I might as well show you guys a little bit behind the scenes of how I paint hyper-realistic eyes. So we're going to jump into that today. I'm going to show you the art materials that I use and what art materials you'll need to learn how to paint hyper-realistic eyes. We'll also jump into how I do the sketch and also adding the base color layer, then adding the second and third and so on mini layers to polish the painting up so it kind of gets closer to the final step of the painting. And we will also see how I add the details and the final touches to make it fantastic. So if you guys are ready, let's get started. So first we're going to take a look and see what art materials we'll need. So they're actually very straightforward. First we'll need a canvas to draw on. You don't need something too big since depending on like how large you would like to draw the eye, and it's just one eye. So let's pick probably a canvas that's 8 by 10. That should be big enough for you to kind of practice your hyper-realistic eye. The bigger the better, because then you can put a lot more details into it. The second thing that we'll need over here is a pencil and eraser so that we can sketch on our eye onto the canvas so that we map everything out, see where everything is, and it will be so much easier when we color and paint it in. And once we have that, we definitely need brushes, or else we can't paint, right? So let's go ahead and grab some really soft synthetic brushes. So I use these dollar store brushes that I had for like ages. They've been taken care of very well and they do the job. So if you can find any kind of soft synthetic brushes, I don't recommend hog bristles. I really hate those. I really dislike those because they don't give you as smooth of a finish, mostly for the kind of paintings I paint really like photorealistic or hyper-realistic, and that you need really smooth layerings, so soft brushes are the best tool that I found. So now we have our brushes. We also need a little bit of linseed oil so it makes the paint flow a little bit better when we add it onto the canvas, because it can get a little bit stubborn. It just doesn't want to go on the dry canvas. So having a little bit of linseed oil into the oil paints that we're painting with makes it a lot more smoother to apply and a lot more buttery. And also we'll need some paper towels to wipe our brushes, and also we'll use a palette knife to mix colors and also to scoop out paint from paint tubes if you have like these humongous paint tubes like I do. Oh, and also don't forget, we also need a palette to mix the paint too. So I just use a regular styrofoam plate. I recently tried this palette out because it's really simple, very easy. These were actually recycled because they used to belong to vegetables. So sometimes when you buy vegetables at like Asian shops, you would have like these styrofoam plates at the bottom. So that's where it came from. So I'm technically reusing this, and I love to be resourceful. So be creative, use what you have at home. You don't have to necessarily buy everything. You could have other alternatives, and kind of being mindful of what you can do with the things you already have. And now the most important part is the paints. So here's a list of the paints that I use to paint my hyper-realistic eye. The first one is titanium white. We also have ivory black. We also do have burnt umber, burnt sienna, and I also used vivid pink. And and a little bit of cadmium yellow to kind of give a little bit of different tint to it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. All the colors that you'll need for this hyper-realistic eye. So now we got our art materials. If you guys are ready to start with our very first step, which is the sketch, let's move on. So first step, what we're going to take here is actually sketching out the drawing onto the canvas. So we want to know where everything is, mapping everything out so it's easier to color. It's kind of like thinking of it as like a coloring book. So, you know, when you have the coloring book, you have the lines and all that stuff. So this is the same idea. You're just creating your very own coloring book or coloring page onto your canvas. So we're going to do some basic sketch outs. Here is an example that I prepared for you guys, so you guys could actually just print this out and copy from that. You can either transfer it onto the canvas, or you can just look at it and just draw it, what you see from the printout, and just replicate that onto your canvas. Very simple, and these are pretty much the lines that I used when I was mapping my eye out. So make sure you kind of download that in the description below. The link is there, so you can feel free to print that out and then transfer that onto your canvas. Next step, step number 2, is to paint in the base layer. So I'm going to show you guys how I painted the base layer and starting to cover up as much of the canvas as possible, and also mainly to cover up the pencil sketches, because sometimes when we mix colors with it, it does get a little bit dirty. So it's nice to have this base layer, because then that way it would actually fix all of the graphite onto canvas so it doesn't smudge and get dirty later on when we add our second and third layers and all the layers after that. So when we're polishing, everything's gonna look super clean. So depending on which area we're working with, I added different mixtures of paint. So for the eyebrows, I did a mixture of titanium white, burnt sienna, and a bit of vivid pink, because I am working with a lot more lighter colors. So I didn't really get into doing any of the ivory black or burnt umber added into the skin tone, to be exact. So it was mostly titanium white, covering up and smoothing things out, along with a little bit of burnt sienna and vivid pink. The iris is the only place where I added a little bit more burnt umber and burnt sienna to make it slightly bit darker, a little bit more brownish tone, because it is a different tone from the skin tone. Okay, so now we got pretty much everything filled in, covered up. We have a good base layer, and this layer is completely dry. So make sure it's dry to the touch. And now we can go ahead and step into coloring and starting to add and paint our second layer, third layer, fourth layer, and so on. So we're polishing things up, getting a lot more of the shadows and the lighting's correct and the colors and values correct. So let's go. So one technique I really love to use here is what I call dabbing. So it's basically very small movements of kind of like stamping in a way, but very lightly with the brush. And then basically this would allow me to get more control of how much paint goes on the area that I'm painting. And if I do want to glide, I can always move it though. But I found the most evenly distributing the paint by using this dabbing technique really helps out making this skin texture look more hyper-realistic. So by using that, depending on where I'm working here, since the eye is actually quite small on my painting, I do need to be very careful of how much movement I make while painting. So that's why it's a lot of small movements back and forth and just touching up a little bit at a time and slowly getting everything polished and kind of reshape into the shape that I need. So in this step of the painting process, there is a lot of shaping forms, correcting shapes if shapes aren't really correct, and then we're adding more smaller details as we go in though, but it's mostly to smooth things out. That's one of the main things for this step, and also making sure that the color and the values are correct, and just double checking shapes, and also just making it a lot smoother with the color and also the gradation of the color and the value. And the last final touch-up. So here is the final step for today's art tutorial. We're going to do some final touch-ups. This is mostly adding the subtle details and also the skin texture. So I'll show you guys how I add my skin texture and what kind of technique I use to actually create this effect and feeling. So now you can see I've switched to a lot smaller and skinnier brush because I'm doing very fine details and adding each single little strokes for the eyelashes. This is like probably the most time consuming part of hyperrealism though, but it's actually quite relaxing. I do really enjoy it because you kind of take your time and gradually fill in and add more eyelashes. And also here, as you can see, I'm adding more of the wrinkles. So with wrinkles and just generally any extra texture on the skin, the key idea is that you want to make sure you want to have similar colors and that it's close enough so that it could easily fade out and appear again. So you don't want the shadows for the wrinkles or any kind of skin texture to be too dark because it's very subtle. It's still more or less on the same surface. It's building on top of that because the pores and wrinkles and skin texture is not that deep into the skin. We do see a little bit of difference though, but it's not that drastic. So we want to be really subtle, making sure that it can easily fade out when we need it to and also reappear so that we could actually see it. Like this part, for example, is a great example for being really subtle with the tones, and I'm really careful with how much paint I apply here. Okay, and that is all for today. Thank you again so much for watching my brand new art tutorial today about how to paint hyperrealistic eye, and I hope you guys learned something new so that it can help you along the way on your art journey to be able to paint hyperrealistic eye. It does take a lot of practice and kind of repetition until you kind of get the flow and familiarity to paint a hyperrealistic eye. It does take time for your eyes to also kind of adjust and be able to see the subtle differences of color, tone, shape, and value, and all that stuff. So take your time. It's a lifelong journey, so make sure you enjoy the process, and I'm super excited to share more tutorials like this with you guys. So yeah, and that is it for today. Make sure to check out my Patreon because I do have the full art tutorial on there. So there is more examples. You'll be able to see how I paint the other eye. So we're going to see more details on how I paint both hyperrealistic eyes. And also you'll get more printouts of the sketch that I did for the other eye and also more in-depth details. So I'll be explaining a lot more detailed stuff, giving you tips and advice along the way as we go through the art tutorial. So then that way it can help you learn, kind of experiment and try things out and improve your art skills. So yeah, make sure you check Patreon, and also if you do like this video, please make sure to check out other videos like this. I do have another video that was about how to paint silk like the old masters, which is something very similar, so go ahead and check that out right over here. I'll leave a link over on one of the slides over here. And then yeah, I think so that's pretty much it. Oh, also please do click the like button, subscribe, and also comment below if you have any questions about how to paint hyperrealistic eyes, and if you have any other recommendations that you would like to learn other new methods and techniques on painting particular subjects, please comment below. I'll be more than happy to create a new art video about that in the future. Yeah, Okay, awesome. Well, happy painting. Stay creative, guys. Have fun experimenting. Explore a bit more. Try things out. Don't be scared to try things out because we all start somewhere. So make sure to have fun. Happy painting. And till the next time, I shall see you in the next video. Awesome. Thanks again. Bye.